Hey there, Eli here, and today we're going to go over the second part of the Manifesto of balance changes. First, I'm going to go through each of the topics that Grinding Gear talked about on the Manifesto. I've simplified it a little bit so that we don't have to read through the entire thing, and I'll point out the problem and solution that they've covered, and then we'll go into my reaction overall. Let's start with the first section where they talk about armor and evasion and dodge. The core problem is that armor only mitigates physical damage, it doesn't help you with elemental. Evasion doesn't help you with spell dodge or evading spell hits. And dodge is just so strong that it outclasses all other defensive layers except for block. Let's talk about armor first. The first thing they're going to do is cut the amount of armor that you need to mitigate a hit by 50% in half. For example, if you want to mitigate a 5,000 damage hit with your armor rating down to 2,500 damage, as in a 50% damage reduction, normally you would need 50,000 armor. That's been cut in half, you now only need 25,000. Additionally, they're going to be adding into the armor nodes on the passive tree increased maximum elemental resistance nodes. So while you're investing into your armor increased percentage passive tree nodes, you'll also be gaining increased maximum elemental resistances. We don't have exact details on how that looks on the tree just yet. Now when it comes to evasion, they've done something similar. Previously, if you wanted to have a 75% chance to evade a tier 16 monster, you would need 49,000 evasion rating. Now you'll only need 24,200. Additionally, they're introducing a mechanic called spell suppression. This is a mechanic where you get a percentage of spell suppression, and that can go up to 100%. And what spell suppression actually does is cuts damage taken from spells in half. So if you have 100% spell suppression, you will always take half spell damage. The ways in which you can get spell suppression are going to be passive tree points, maybe some cluster jewels, as well as modifiers on evasion gear. Now in addition to that, they've removed attack dodge. And with that, they've reworked the acrobatics keystone, as well as the phase acrobatics keystone if you call a rework deleting it from the tree. Acrobatics is now going to convert spell suppression into spell dodge at half value. So if you have capped spell suppression at 100% and you take acrobatics, you instead have 50% spell dodge. According to Grinding Gear, this is currently going to be the only source of spell dodge in the game. Also, the cap on spell dodge is still 75%. So if you got up to 150% spell suppression, you would have capped 75% spell dodge. I guess this means at Ziri's step is going to be changed, and other sources of dodge are going to be removed and altered, but that remains to be seen. Next up, the problem is energy shield characters using energy shield recharge and regeneration. Next up, problem is energy shield characters primarily focusing on leech and regeneration, passive regeneration specifically, as opposed to making use of energy shield's natural high regeneration rate, or what's called the recharge mechanic. Their solution to this is to try to take focus away from leech and regeneration, although allowing you still to specialize into that if you want to. First up, they've increased the base recharge rate for energy shield to 33%. It's currently 20%, so that's a pretty significant buff. They also changed the Wicked Ward keystone so that the only downside is going to be 40% less energy shield recharge rate, which means that if you take Wicked Ward, you'll now have a base of 19.8% energy shield recharge instead of 33%. And if you remember, Wicked Ward makes it so that if your energy shield recharge started recently, it doesn't get interrupted by damage. They've also added new modifiers on energy shield based body armor and shields, which can both give up to 66% faster start of energy shield recharge. Percent regeneration for energy shield mods have been removed. Ghost Reaver, which allows leech to apply to energy shield, now prevents energy shield recharge entirely instead of giving you 50% less recharge. But increased maximum energy shield leech per second is also more powerful now on the tree, so if you want to invest into that leech mechanic, you should be still viable. Remains to be seen on what the exact numbers are. Next problem is energy shield and evasion hybrid characters almost exclusively needed to be tricksters for the Ghost Dance Ascendancy passive. Grinding Gear's solution? Give everyone the passive. That keystone is now on the regular passive tree. We don't know how the Trickster is going to change just yet. Next up on the hybrid problem is Armor and Energy Shield characters basically have zero synergy in the entire game. Their solution: add a new keystone skill called Divine Shield, which makes it so you regenerate energy shield based on a percentage of the total physical damage you have mitigated recently. The exact numbers aren't out yet, but the amount of energy shield regeneration you can get can't be more than your armor rating. And I know I said I was going to wait for reactions till the end, but I'm always a fan of increased synergy for build types that currently don't exist. Next problem, the shadow area of the tree basically has no life regeneration and not really any good way to deal with damage over time. Grinding Gear's solution here is to give life regeneration modifiers on gear a stronger boost in their values, as well as a new keystone that's called Lethe Shade. I think that's how it's pronounced, if Google can be trusted, which makes it so you take 75% less damage over time if you have started taking damage over time in the past second. It also increases ailment duration on you by 100%. And their exact wording is 100% more duration of ailments on you, so it's twice as long. I could see this downside being picked up by Fulcrum users or anyone that wants to reflect ailments back on themselves for bonuses, so that might open up some interesting possibilities for builds. Another problem, if you want really high regeneration rate, you are essentially tied to endurance charge related life regeneration mechanics. And their solution apparently is to remove that synergy between endurance charges and life regeneration and put nodes on the tree that give you life regeneration, with the final node in that cluster being increased life regeneration rate, which is a multiplier against your life regeneration. Further on this life regeneration, life gain problem, shadow-based melees or attackers don't have a good way to regenerate life or invest into that. And their solution is going to be to add new clusters and improve existing clusters to give the shadow area better investment capabilities for life gain on hit, life gain on kill, and leech. Now for some bigger ones. One of the problems, 75-75 block is essentially only obtainable through easy means anyway, by being a gladiator and getting versatile combatant. This makes it so that your attack block is equal to your spell block. So their solution is to put versatile combatant in a weaker form onto the passive tree. What it'll do now is when you take it, your max block and spell block are going to be 50 instead of 75, but for every point, every percentage point of block for attack block above 50%, you get 2% spell block. What all these numbers mean is if you take versatile combatant on the tree now, you will have 50-50 maximum block, but you'll only have to invest your attack block up to the original cap of 75 in order to meet that 50 attack block, 50 spell block. I gotta say, this is nice because block is so strong, and it kind of sucks to only be a gladiator if you want to easily get capped block without any downsides. So I welcome this change, and I'm interested to see what they come up with to replace that ascendancy notable for the gladiator. Next problem, shields are pigeonholed into only being useful if they are a pure shield, as in hybrid shields get boned because their modifiers just aren't good enough. And there's a lot of different things that are going on here, so I'm going to stop looking at you and I'm going to look at my list here so I can read it off. Their solution is to allow hybrid shields to roll actual valuable modifiers, but also give pure shields more modifiers to make it worthwhile if you want to invest in those to give them some more identity. So the pure armor shields can now roll up to 8% physical damage reduction, just straight phys reduction. Pure evasion shields can roll up to 34% chance for spell suppression, which is pretty cool. And pure energy shields can roll up to 66% faster start of energy shield recharge. Armor hybrid shields can now roll up to 100 life gain on block. Evasion hybrids can now roll up to 480 accuracy rating, and energy shield hybrids, this is a big one, can now roll increased critical strike chance for spells. So they're opening up shields and hybrid shields to allow for these other builds to exist. Next problem is the blind mechanic. Why is it a problem? Because like block and dodge, it is just so powerful for everybody. And their solution is to make it so that blind now puts a debuff on monsters to give them 20% less accuracy and 20% less evasion. So this is twofold. This now means that if you're an evasion-based character, this is really helpful for you, but if you're not evasion-based, it doesn't really mean anything. Also, it has an offensive component in that monsters that are evasive have the evasive tag or special modifier for rares and whatnot. They have less evasion rating, making them easier to hit. And finally, they're looking at the problem of Fortify. Fortify is also super strong because you can weapon swap, or maybe not have to weapon swap, and use something like Whirling Blades or Shield Charge in order to get Fortify at maximum effect on essentially any character, which is pretty mandatory. Flat damage reduction from all sources is incredibly strong, and so they're going to experiment with a system where the amount of melee damage you deal is going to affect the effectiveness of the Fortify buff that you receive. Whether or not they're going to take into account melee damage over time builds and whether this affects elemental based melee builds in some weird way remains to be seen. We don't have a lot of details on this, but I think it might be overall a good thing. And that's a good segue into my overall reaction to all of these changes, which is it seems to me like they are going in the direction that I was hoping they would. I put out a video recently, it might have been one video or two videos ago. I'll put a link that pops up while I'm talking about this right here, where I talk about the identity crisis of defenses. And it looks like they are kind of doing essentially what I was hoping they would do. They're taking a step back from pigeonholing everyone into specific kinds of defensive layers, like dodge and block, which is exactly what games like Diablo 3 do. And I'm not here to crap on Diablo 3. It's a fine game for what it is. I don't personally care for it because it's very, this is how you will play this character, and you will get these items and these sets, and that is the only way to be maximally efficient with this character ever. I don't like that. Path of Exile for me is more of free form. Here's a bunch of directions you can go, and here are some pretty strong identities for defenses and offense, and you can mix and match in weird ways, and good luck doing it. We're not going to care too much. We're going to put all these options in so you have flexibility to make characters that you identify with and that you think would be fun. And I think that's exactly the direction we're now going, especially with some increased buffs on the flasks to make them a little bit stronger again, and more importantly, giving armor and evasion some much needed identity. Those two were in danger of falling off from relevance almost completely in the entire game, in my opinion. The fact that armor only mitigates against physical damage and evasion doesn't help with spells, these are two things that Grinding Gear have identified correctly and said, okay, we need to have systems where if you want to be an evasion-based character, you can also deal with spell damage. And same for armor. If you want to be this big tanky guy, you have to also be able to deal with the fact that you're also going to take a lot of elemental damage. So to me, that's very cool. I am overall breathing a sigh of relief from reading this. I'm very interested to see how they tackle the aura bot problem in the next manifesto, but for this, just the overall design change and philosophy change, their trajectory back towards what I view Grinding Gear and Path of Exile to be as a game and as a company, is giving people options and really putting the identity back into these defensive layers, which, if you elaborate further on that, is basically giving stronger identities for the characters that we create. And isn't that the whole point, is to take these disparate systems and put them together in strange ways, like a weird puzzle that ends up working really well and doing something really cool? I think so. I think that's what Path of Exile in its ultimate form is supposed to be, is to allow all of these options for different build types and archetypes that you can invest strongly into one direction, but then also mix and match if you want to, in order to get crazy powerful or crazy unique and still effective builds. I also like the direction of putting more keystones onto the passive tree and allowing ascendancies to be a little more wacky and weird, maybe give them more branching out, better identities themselves. Like the Trickster, for example. I mean, Trickster is essentially only used for Ghost Dance. Just like, I mean, Trappers and Miners have to be Saboteur. I'm kind of fine with that. It is what it is. But going to the gladiator, I mean, if you want to do 75-75 block without taking glancing blows, you have to be a gladiator. And that sucks because the gladiator could be way more interesting than just a block node. And I get that, you know, Ghost Dance and Versatile Combatant for gladiator are both like really strong keystones, and they're kind of like what made builds work. But it's a little too much. Keystones are supposed to alter the way the game plays, and most of the time they're supposed to have some kind of downside. So Versatile Combatant having the 50-50 max block downside, but also allowing most characters or any character to theoretically get 50-50 block, I'm okay with that. That's an interesting downside. It's a reasonable downside, I think, but it's still very powerful. Couple that with increasing the viability of shields in general to give them more ability to synergize with different kinds of builds, giving some synergy to armor energy shield builds, coupled with the ability for armor to actually block and mitigate hits. This could be really good. This could be a really interesting league. I almost don't really care what the league is. All of these changes are going to be a league in and of themselves and allow for a much wider breadth of character creation and build ideas to actually flourish and work within the game. And that's my rant. That's what I think about it. Those are my thoughts and feelings. As always, if you aren't subscribed, I'd appreciate a subscription to my channel. We are growing fast and it's great. And I will have some more information, some more YouTube breakdowns for the next Manifesto and the upcoming league changes and league mechanics. So stick around for that. And with that all said, this is Eli signing off.